private equity-backed manufacturer of food safety chemicals. And so we manufacture high-level proprietary disinfectants for all of our food manufacturers, all of our animal health facilities. Been at Sterilex for almost 17 years now, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Great. Hey, everybody. Craig Bandes. I'm the CEO of Pixelligent Technologies. So we're a manufacturer in Baltimore, Maryland. We make nanoparticles. So the stuff that we make are between 10 and 20 nanometers. A typical strand of hair is about 60,000 nanometers in diameter. There's only a few companies in the world that can control science at that scale. And most of what we make are finding their way into electronics devices, mobile screens. Increasingly, this brave new world that was talked about earlier today, in the metaverse, we're helping to empower the headsets, the augmented and mixed reality headsets, to really drive the optics out of those devices. And excited to be here today.
Good afternoon, everybody. Greg Tselikis. Can everybody hear me okay? There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Greg Tselikis with SC&H Group. I'm a director in our technology advisory practice. In that practice, we help organizations that are looking at using technology more strategically to build the plan, execute on the plan, pivot with the plan over time, and help be kind of an ally and an advisor to our clients as they go through the digital transformation journey. So our clients range from everything from nonprofits to manufacturers, and excited to be here today.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, so before we get into some stories and talk a little bit about your own experiences, Greg, let's lay a little bit of a foundation here, and I like what Chip did where he talked about a shared definition, so I kind of want to reestablish that. Let's talk about digital transformation and how we're going to sort of just define it and discuss it in this panel.
Yeah, really good question. I hope I'm on the same page as the previous speaker, but I think digital transformation, it's kind of, it can be a very nebulous, topic when you think about it, but and if I actually Googled it to see kind of what the rest of the world was saying digital transformation is, and if you really look at it, there's a lot of varying terms about it, and I think that's kind of some of the pieces that we do want to talk about today is really what does true digital transformation look like. I think a key piece of that is that digital transformation, in my opinion, when you kind of think about it on the surface, it sounds like an event, but in my opinion, it's really not an event. It's a continuum over time of we've agreed that we are going to go down this path as an organization to adapt our processes using modern technology, serve our customers better, become more efficient, and there's a start to that process, but I would say there really isn't an end to that process. And that's a really important piece that I think about as we talk through today. There's the build the plan, and then there's also the how do we keep executing on the plan over time, pivoting on the plan over time. Real digital transformation is something that once you start it, I don't think that there really is ever an end to it.
Okay, fair. I think another important buzzy term then to talk for a minute about, because it applies to how we're going to talk about building a roadmap and a plan for executing, is tech debt. And I think a lot of people have probably heard that thrown around, and I didn't really understand it. I think it is really buzzy, but it actually is it's a business concept that is not strange or weird. So give us that understanding, Greg, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, the tech debt concept, I mean, I think, we see it over and over again of it's trying to do more with technology and realizing that you're getting lesser and lesser outcomes. It's almost like a negative cycle here where the more complexity, the more legacy systems, the more the technology doesn't map to current business processes, current customer demands, you start getting in this cycle where you're doing more and getting less output. I think it's taking a step back and recognizing that you may be in that spot where we're putting more and more effort into technology and potentially getting less of a return. To me, that's tech debt, and it's really a trigger point for let's take a pause for a moment, think about kind of where we are. Is this now really a time to really kind of rethink, reassess, and maybe rebuild a new plan that maybe takes it may take some time to execute on, but really gets us out of that negative cycle and more towards we now have a plan that we can accelerate into the future using new technology, new platforms, new approaches to processes that consider technology.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a good sort of foundation for us to have a better discussion. So I want to pivot to Craig and Alex for a second. We did obviously have a conversation before we talked to all of you guys. And Alex, you said something about the concept of digital transformation in your organization, and it was the driver is really to make your people's jobs easier, make it easier for them to get their jobs done, which I think is an awesome mission. Was there a tipping point, like Greg talks about this point of diminishing returns, was there a tipping point in your organization that got you thinking this way? And Craig, same question to you. So after he's done answering, you've got a little more time to think about it.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what is my job as a CEO? Certainly to set a strategic direction, but really to hire experts in their field and then to pave the way for them, right? You make it easy for them to be doing their job. And whenever I sense that technology, which is not their job, is holding them back, it's my job to make it more efficient. And so, I'm not sure, Sarah, that there was one specific tipping point, but whether it was, building an international business or bringing on more manufacturing locations or going virtual during COVID, for example. I mean, it's my job to make sure that technology is driving growth and driving innovation, and not necessarily holding us back. So I just found that especially when we had on-premise type of servers, technology that were really being held back by our own IT capabilities, and that's not our core competency. And so let's focus on what we do well, and let's outsource what we don't do well. And so for me, it was just ensuring that I'm doing what I can, again, to let my people do what they do best.
How do you know what you don't know, right? I feel like the technology is evolving so fast and there's so much out there. It's not necessarily your job either to stay on top of all of that. So how do you sort of monitor that landscape? Do you benchmark yourself against other companies like yours? How are you understanding what the opportunities are?
So I would say, number one, that I'm surprised how few companies actually look at technology as anything more than a cost center. And so for me, I wasn't necessarily an expert in what tools were out there, but I knew what I wanted to have accomplished. And so bringing in a consultant, someone like Greg, and Greg will tell you, I'll email him daily and say, I wish there was a tool that could do X, Y, Z. And oftentimes Greg will come back with options there. So again, that's not my job to know that. That's why I hire people whose job it is to know that.
If you can dream it, it can do it, sort of thing. What about you, Craig? Thoughts on the tipping point?
Yeah, so I would say it's a combination of trying to help my employees do their jobs better, for sure, and more efficiently. So we had a couple different systems, an accounting system, a Salesforce system, and a really horrible ERP system. And we started getting to a place that we were having so many products, so we actually invent the products and manufacture them in Baltimore, and then sell them around the world, predominantly in Asia with sales offices and distributors. And so for us, it was, okay, how do we make that whole order flow process easier for everybody and ultimately have a better experience for our customers on one level. On the other level, we also started seeing that we needed to speed up our product development cycle. And so we started going to a new AI platform about 2.5 years ago. And it was an early bet. And in this case, it actually wasn't something that initially made our employees' jobs easier. In fact, it made it harder, because they had to figure out how to use and interact with this system. In our world, something called the Lab Information Management System, we generate just gigabits of data, a year with all the experiments and development that we're doing. And so how do we capture that data and start to use that and mine that as a way to accelerate product development? And that took away from the process of scientists using their notebooks still, which they've been doing since their PhD programs. And so you got to stop that. No more notebooks. Everything's got to be digitized. You got to put everything into the system, and that's taken some time. I mean, I would say we're just now a little more than 2 years into it, starting to see some of the benefits of that. So for us, when we look at tools, it's on one level, how do we make their jobs easier? Another level is how do we, as a company, become more productive and more efficient and safer, ultimately, in terms of capturing that data. Even if it requires a change in behavior, we've had some pretty big, and we're still going through it. We have a fair amount of buy-in, but there are very consistent conversations and meetings, and to make sure that we're doing what we say we're going to do and hit the deadlines of making some of this convergence happen. So it's a little bit of both for us.
What about other stakeholders? So I know both of your companies have outside investors. You both have some really large, scary customers. Is there any outside stakeholders, or are your employees or any of the scientists coming to you clamoring for the latest technology tool? Any of that pushing you along?
Well, a couple things I'll mention, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but until our current private equity firm invested in our business, we were a family-held business with no outside investment, 100% bootstrap company. And so I've been, focused for years on how do we responsibly scale this business profitably? We can't burn cash. And so that's been one driver of technology is, how do I not need 15 people and I can use one software program to be doing that? I can say, when we brought in outside investment, we were actually state of the art in terms of portfolio companies using technology. So there wasn't a big stake driver of transformation for us. I think when I look at corporate KPIs, whether it's being an international business or whether it's bringing on 5 new product lines. I mean those transformational events for us require that all of our processes and systems can handle that without necessarily freezing our whole processes and system. And so I've always wanted to have systems and processes of $1 billion organization of the company that I want to be versus the company that I am.
I love that.
Yeah. So in terms of stakeholders, I would say there's an interest in doing things more efficiently to a degree. Again, our mix of employees is pretty diverse, and so even though some of these PhDs are some of the smartest scientists on the planet, having them change their process and the way they behave is sometimes a challenge to get them to do it. So you have to get their buy-in. You have to say, by using the AI platform, instead of having to do these 15 experiments, it'll tell you the 3 you need to do that should get to where you want to go. And when they start to see the benefits of that and increasing productivity, I think it helps. I think with some of those big, scary customers, which are some of the biggest consumer electronics companies in the world that we work with, whenever we sign an agreement with them, there are all kinds of requirements, from security requirements to redundancy requirements. And when they see you don't have a robust ERP system, it's something you have to sell past, and we kind of blame it on where we are in our stage of development and R&D. But there's an expectation that we're gonna get there, right? And so, to me, those are the 2 big stakeholders. From a board perspective, I think there is a level of wanting to have more continuity and have systems that are more held together, especially as we think about what an exit would look like down the road to a large materials company. Having a robust system in place that can make it easy for them to do an integration is going to be an important part of that stage of the company's life as well. So it's also a future stakeholder concept for us.
That's a good segue into where I wanted to go with this, and the concept of sort of building a roadmap or a framework. So I think both of you have alluded to very clearly that your companies have gone through a lot of change and are continuing to change. And I think that's something really important for everyone to keep in mind when you talk about digital transformation. None of this is happening in a vacuum, right? Like, there's other stuff going on with your company at the same time. It's not like you can just shut the doors for 6 months and digitally transform the organization and then reopen again. So it's important to have an understanding about where the organization is going and aligning whatever digital efforts you're going to make to that vision, to those goals. So, Greg, take us through a little bit about the concept of a framework or a roadmap and how you help companies build them. I imagine they have to be flexible, but also disciplined at the same time.
Yeah, it's certainly a tricky balance between figuring out what's the set in stone part of that roadmap versus where it's okay to flex, where we need to flex. But I think, when we build a roadmap for an organization, what we always start with is understanding the needs across the organization. What are the known needs across the organization? Where are we going as an organization? What do we know are going to be the pitfalls? And establish some of that criteria up front so that we can build kind of that baseline roadmap of, we know we need these things in place to be successful. The point we referred to ERP a couple of times, we know we need a flexible, adaptable ERP that can change with the business. We know we need systems that, will facilitate more rapid product development over time. Those things are probably constants, and we can identify those up front. It's not that, that we might not flex and evolve how we're using those, portions of the roadmap over time. But I do always like to start with here's the pieces we've got to do right. We really need to make these part of our foundational plan. And in a lot of cases, those are systems, software, applications. But alongside of that, we're also trying to identify what those core processes are and where there is either friction with technology today or there is a large opportunity, to use technology to enhance process going forward, and adapting that process with it. So part of the roadmap is what do we need from a technology platform standpoint, but a big part of that roadmap too is that we're talking about is what are the points along the way where we need to be working across the organization to change process, adapt process, and kind of go through that cyclically. Beyond that, I think the key is when you mentioned, adapting, flexing to change, new requirements, that's always going to happen. So I think part of the plan is making sure there's room in the plan to account for that. There's always going to be a change in the plan. And having the criteria in place and all the stakeholders bought into understanding, what would the thresholds be for us agreeing that we're going to change focus, pivot the plan. There's always shiny things to chase after, and sometimes that's there's opportunity to do that. But the risk there is that we lose focus from what the core plan is. So I like to always establish, a decision-making criteria in that roadmap and framework for if we are going to deviate from the plan. Here are the criteria that suggest, why we would do that. Get stakeholder buy-in and go from there. It's kind of like a pyramid. You have that foundational base, then you have the stuff that we know is going to probably come down the pike. We don't necessarily know exactly what it's going to be yet, but we can at least prepare, plan, and build around the eventuality of it happening. And then kind of the top piece there is there's going to be the moonshot ideas that are eventually going to come up. We're going to try it. We're going to see if it works. We might fail. We may have to pivot, but kind of leaving capacity in the plan for each of those tiers and scaling it correctly, I think, is a big part of what we're trying to do from looking at resources and what an organization is able to adapt to over time.
And with technology evolving so quickly and businesses evolving so quickly, how far out are you typically building these roadmaps?
Yeah,
and then do you just build a new roadmap after that time is up, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think the worst case scenario is you build a roadmap, you put it on the shelf, and you never look at it again. I mean, and I think as we were talking about earlier, the roadmap does always need to evolve. It needs to evolve, with the organization. That's typically takes the form in continually working with the organization to understand where we are, where we're going, what's working, what's not working. But that baseline, we need the right systems, we need the right overall tools and technologies in place at a fundamental level. I mean, in that case, we're planning for 3+ years of these are the solid platforms that we're going to grow everything off of. From there, the timeline I think gets incrementally shorter. But as things kind of come off the roadmap, the key is, are we always incrementally adding new things onto the tail so that we don't just stop and stagnate again.
What would you say are the key components that come on? I'm picturing a timeline, that I've got on my whiteboard or whatever of our technology, our digital transformation roadmap. The people responsible for executing, the budgets, the departments involved. What are the key components of this that people need to be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of it. I mean, I think typically what we're, one of the things we're looking at in the roadmap too is where is this initiative contributing to? Is it really it's going to help us stabilize and run the business? Is it going to reduce manual process, improve existing process? It's a core business function. We're also looking at other areas like, is this something that's going to help us incrementally scale in the future? When's that scale going to occur? And then where are the items that are really going to actually transform the organization, bring on new ideas, bring us in different directions. We evaluate on what really the outcome of that initiative is going to be, but then beyond that, it's going to be, do we have the resources to do it? Do we have the budget to do it? How does this fit in with other competing priorities in the organization? Are we, is there too much change going on in the organization that the technology may be there, but we're moving at a pace that the organization's not going to be able to adapt and change over time. And those are the key things that we're always thinking about.
And we had that with you, right? So we started and stopped.
Yep.
Right? So it was probably a good 9-month pause, right? So we thought we were ready, and then it turned out we weren't quite ready yet, right? And so even we'd gone out, we'd put together the plan, we identified the potential vendors, we even met with most of the vendors, and then we just kind of disappeared for a little while. We had some other things to figure out. And then it was like, okay, we're ready, right? And so at that point, we re-engaged with the vendors, and we came back to you once and for us, we set up, and you probably did the same, Alex, when it came time to looking at the system, it wasn't me saying, we're picking this. It was getting all the stakeholders around the table from all of the different groups so that, they were part of the decision-making process, right? You just can't say, I picked this one, good luck, right? You have to have the buy-in, from us from the manufacturing side, the sales side for Salesforce, the R&D people, the product development folks, the formulators, QC, shipping, like everybody that's going to touch the ERP system had to literally physically sign off on the group decision that we were going with this package. And then from there, obviously it's going to evolve, but yeah, I think we're now in a much better position. We're more ready to execute on the plan today, way more than we would have been a year ago when we first started meeting with you guys to try and put that plan together.
Yeah, and I think being very conscious about the organization's ability to be prepared for change and what that's really going to mean, not just from how the organization is going to adapt. People have their day jobs. I mean, the technology decision is only half the decision there. The other decision is, are we really ready for this? What needs to happen to make us ready? I mean, that's the entire dimension to kind of think through when we're making technology-based decisions.
Do you guys feel like, and this is not on our outline, this is a curveball, do you guys feel like you can get some momentum? So, you stopped and started, but now that you're going again, is the next change going to be a little bit easier now that you're moving along? Or do you have to go through this change management like every single time?
I mean, so one of the difficulties I'm struggling with right now with an organization we're working with is that it's actually the opposite, is that we're now having to figure out how to say no, because there is only so much that we can do at one point in time, only so much that we can really absorb organizationally, and it's coming up with a framework, the steering committee, to really evaluate what are we doing, what are we not doing that we might want to do, and how to prioritize some of that so that the other stakeholders around the organization that have needs, they understand that their needs have been acknowledged. They're part of the plan. They're just not part of the today plan, but they understand where they're fitting in over time, and it's just that's a continual conversation as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, for every one of our digital transformation projects, we treat it just like one of our internal new product development processes, where I start off with a project charter that's written by our group. Why are we doing this? Everybody needs to know why we're doing this project, and it's not simply me saying it. It's everybody saying, we believe our organization could utilize this. It's then having a scrum master, right, or a project leader who's going to be the one driving timelines, is going to be the one ultimately responsible. And by the way, you need to compensate them based off of that. And so, almost always that person's day job is not IT for me. But I mean, this will take a lot of time for them to be able to manage. And so part of their KPIs that they're going to be bonused off of is successful execution of this project. And then there's a daily project team. And then there's a steerco. I love that steerco model. We use that for all of our projects, where not necessarily the same individuals that are doing the work every day, but like you're meeting monthly or every 6 weeks, whatever the cadence is needed for that specific project, and you're actually reporting on that, and you're getting guidance, so that there's no surprises at the end. You have yellow flags that flagged early, but it's a much more collaborative process with clear expectations, milestones, a compensation for it, and everybody understands the why. That's important, and can celebrate a successful outcome.
So when you're building these teams to design the product charter or the process charter, are these cross-functional teams? Do you bring in someone from all parts of the organization? And then how do you choose these leaders? Do they have a choice? Or is it like, we're doing this?
The first question is they have to be cross-functional.
Okay.
And so obviously technology, as well as our own product development, requires inputs from everybody. So whether it's a LIMS system for the lab, or an ERP system, or a CRM system, I mean, there's going to be input from customer service, manufacturing, sales, marketing, R&D. I mean, all of them have to have an input, right? These projects are also high-profile opportunities for motivated people to get their name out there, right? So usually we don't have an issue getting people to raise their hand. If we do, there's going to have to be some coaxing. I mean, obviously we need certain people to be involved, but I can tell you from our experience, typically people are motivated to be involved in projects like this. It's an opportunity to make a name for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, so let's get into some specific examples here. Can you both take us through, and we'll start with you, Craig. What has been the path so far? You mentioned you got some stuff done, you took a pause, now you're starting again. Walk everyone through what your digital transformation journey has been up to this point.
Yeah, I mean, a pretty steep learning curve, right? So we were coming off of this very sophisticated program called QuickBooks. You guys have heard of it before? Anybody else use that once in a while when they started out? So it's actually gotten pretty good. I mean, I think it's a bad rap sometimes. But, but moving off of that onto, a number of different systems, right? And just getting the organization to realize how important this process is. But there's nothing like pain, right? There's nothing like having to put the same order in 3 different systems for with 4 or 5 different people to realize how horrible the current process is. And the potential that if you could just do it once, I mean, how great would that be, right? And so it kind of it sells itself to a degree at that point. But it was saying, okay, so we know we need something. We're a mid-tier type manufacturing company. What kind of software can we use for that? And we actually make all of our stuff in-house. There's others that do more outsourcing. That's a very different type of need for software. So we need to, how we think about our controlling and looking at our BOM and everything that goes into it. Do a lot of international. How will it also feed in the orders come in through Salesforce? How does it work? How is it going to work with the Salesforce or, augmentation? And then how does it fit into this really sort of next-gen type of AI platform for us? So it's been having champions with each of the teams there. From the ERP system, it's actually being driven by the CFO. We put our second most senior most person in the company to drive it, to show the commitment we have to go doing it, and he's holds the team accountable. And then on the technical side, it's giving champions and people the opportunity to really show that they can manage a complex project and deliver on it, and that also shows their management chops for career path, right? And so it's giving folks inside the organization opportunities to grow beyond what their current role and responsibility may be. And so all of those starts, and we talked about this a lot already, and with buy-in, right, of sitting down and saying, okay, we know we want to get to here, order goes in one time, flows through, gets shipped, customer's happy, right? So what does that look like? What has to transform? And it isn't just systems, right? There's a lot of behaviors that we need to change internally to make sure that we're going to be in alignment with the software package that we came to decide to take on and to implement around, because not every software aligns perfectly with every internal process, obviously. And so for us, it's putting the plan together, and then we didn't have a real CIO capability internally, which is why we went to SC&H and Greg to really help map it out and then be hands-on in playing that role for us, in the organization. At some point, we may need that internally, but for now, this is the best way for us to get there the most quickly. And help make sure that we're keeping true to that roadmap that we've laid out, right? So, and then multiple touch points to make sure that we're seeing the results of the investments that we're making.
So how did you, and this is I think specific to your company, because you mentioned you've got this AI tool that you're using as well on like the product and R&D side. How did you decide like that was first, and then go to ERP? Like, AI seems much more futuristic and scary than an accounting software. So how did you do that?
Yeah. Well, it's not ChatGPT. We can't say go make that product for us quite yet, unfortunately. It started out as of a need for a lab information management system, right? And we started looking at LIMS, and then one of the folks on the team said, well, LIMS is a component of what we can use in AI, because you're going to put all of the information in. Wouldn't it be great if once the information is in, it was actually more useful than just keeping track of lab notes, right? And we could mine that data to then start to create the next level, next generation of products. We're like, well, that would be cool, right? And it started with that. And then one of our advisory board members happens to be on a board of a company called Uncountable, who we started working with, and we thought what they had was pretty interesting. And they were also pretty early stage, so they said, hey, if we work together, we'll give you a break, and you'll help us define better the modules that we could use. And now they're becoming actually a pretty big brand out there in the manufacturing world. So some of it was sort of happenstance, how it came together. Of it was beyond the initial need, but it was also a little bit of having, I think, for the team that was looking at it, some pretty good vision of, okay, well, where do we go to from here, and how could we use that technology? And for us, much more important, don't tell my CFO he said this, than having a better bookkeeping system is getting products developed more quickly and out the door with fewer people that are difficult to find, right? And so it was really more core to our business to accelerate product development than making sure we're closing out the numbers as on an easier basis for him right now. And then from there, it also then helps us think about, from an ERP perspective, how do then all of these pieces fit together, right?
And what's next after the ERP?
I think taking a breath and making sure everybody knows how to use it, and then seeing the return on the investment. There's lots of interesting tools out there that I think are available for companies like us. But I'm also a believer of, we made the decision, we made the investment, we need to see the return on the set of investments we've made over the past 2 or 3 years before we think about anything significant after that, and really let the organization become expert in the tools that we have. Maybe there'll be, little add-on here and there if we think there's something that can help in a specific area. But really, it's to take a pause, make sure we're using it properly, think about, in a very thoughtful way, what else could be useful, and then decide what that next roadmap looks like.
Did you guys define a set of metrics? Like you said, let's see how our ROI measures out. Do you have clear metrics on what success looks like did you for the AI platform, do you for the ERP? We do.
AI is making products faster, with having to use less materials and have less people, right, at the end of the day. For the ERP system, it's really that really simple example of put the order in once and let it flow through the system, right? And then have a much better sense of what inventory is versus doing a physical count, right? And it's making the organization more efficient, having to be less human capital dependent in certain areas, and let us take that same investment and invest in the human capital that will really move the company forward from a product perspective. And a lot of it is, just in general, seeing the ability for, when it gets back to the financial side of things, audits go more smoothly, right? And then those are pretty basic requirements as well, right? And then think about how it can help us as we expand our international footprint, but that's a work in process for us.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, so take us through your journey, Alex.
Yeah, so if I look back at, when I started, like many self-funded startups, what our IT environment looked like is all of our email was on POP3, so no server at all, and if it wasn't on your laptop, then it was gone forever. We had QuickBooks on-premise, so if you were off-premise, you couldn't enter in any orders. Originally, all of our files were simply on our local computers. Eventually, we had upgraded to an external hard drive connected to a laptop in our computer room. That was our server, and then we were using Excel for all of our inventory mapping. Yeah, I don't think that was that unusual at that time for companies of our size. But I realized very quickly, I had pretty ambitious growth goals for the business that wasn't going to be sufficient, and we're spending way too much time break fixing than anything else. Oh, I mentioned a break fix. We had one part-time IT guy, 1-800 IT help or whatever to help us fix computers. So brought in CIO, starting with very basics. And I mentioned just had a phone call, but IT security is table stakes, right? So IT security to me is not a catalyst for growth. It's a base requirement to do anything else. So doing an audit of all of our IT security, making sure that's a fundamental premise of anything else that we do. And so fixing all those gaps there. Then very basic things like Office 365, Microsoft 365. I realized very quickly that I want to be very cloud-based in everything I do, make it scalable. I want to rely on Microsoft's core competency in scalability, IT security versus developing something myself. And so Microsoft 365. We then implemented a NetSuite ERP system. In the cloud, we use Right project management systems, and then Salesforce, certainly Salesforce.com throughout our whole CRM system. And then really we kind of went hog wild from there. So looked at, and now we have the building blocks. How can we use this to actually leverage efficiencies? And so we use Showpad for all of our sales enablement, for all of our marketing and our sales folks. We use LabGuru for our LIMS system. We had to become GDPR compliant. And so as we grow internationally, we use PatSnap for a lot of our IP estate research. So I guess big picture is there's some basic table stakes things like IT security, access to files in a secure, nimble manner when you're anywhere in the world. Basic, how do I fill orders one time without inputting them in a multiple system where there can be errors. Those are basic enablers to be able to execute on where you want to. And then there's other things that'll actually be differentiators for you in the marketplace. I mean, we are much more profitable than other companies in our space because we can be more lean than they can through technology usage. So I would, again, categorize them differently between, do those building blocks first, and we got that done, and then find further enablers to differentiate yourself in the market.
So you named a lot, you dropped a lot of names there, and this may be part of the roadmap discussion. Do all those, is that one cohesive system? Is it all talking to each other, or did you put something in and then add 2 or 3 more things and realize, shoot, that one doesn't really talk to the other ones and we should have picked a different one, or is it all integrated?
So one of my core tenets is simplicity. I love what Chip mentioned earlier, which is, don't go hog wild on security if it isn't usable, right? I believe that for anything that I implement, why implement something that no one's going to use? So I've purposefully chosen modular systems that do talk to one another. And so, for example, our NetSuite ERP. NetSuite's not a perfect system, but it does integrate with, almost everything else that we do. And I know you asked Craig about roadmap for the future. I mean, that's our biggest roadmap for the future, is using Power BI and other business intelligence to actually bring in multiple sources of data into one location. So one example for us is, we sell almost all of our products through distribution, third parties. And they oftentimes provide us with end user sales data in Excel format, and they sold to these 600 customers our products. We know how many units they sold. However, we also have data on how much we sold those distributors in NetSuite. And we also have our pipeline in Salesforce. And so we have Salesforce, we have NetSuite, and we have this Excel data. And we're utilizing Power BI now to have one central database, a warehouse, where our salespeople can say, okay, look, a $5 million pipeline here, we closed 20% of that, and these 5 locations from X distributor bought, but that a distributor's out of inventory now, and actually give us alerts in advance, almost like an AI system, but not quite AI. We're actually looking at it ourselves, but really bringing in all this data that we have in a one consumable format.
Yeah, because you've done a good job building these source systems, so now
That's
you can
right.
layer this piece on top. Very cool. Okay, so this all sounds very rosy and exciting, but I'm sure there were some hurdles along the way. I mean, Craig, you alluded to having to take a pause. What do people need to be aware of? Like, what was the biggest hurdle you came up against? And we're probably going to talk about change management and that active and passive resistance that Chip mentioned. But take us through some hurdles and things people need to watch out for.
Sure, Craig.
Yeah, oh, sure. Well, I would say we're still midstream, so I'm sure there's many more that we'll come up against. I think for us it was really hard to pick the right solution at first, and there was hotly debated discussions around and sessions around what is the right tool for us. So that's the positive. I mean, the negative part to a degree, of having lots of stakeholders around the table, because people have different ideas of what's going to be best for them, and becomes just a group negotiation to get to a final answer. And so I think for us, we're still pretty early in the process, I think the good news so far is that everyone's deeply engaged in where we are, and there's a weekly team meeting, and there's a check-in with Greg and the team at SC&H pretty regularly, and so I have not yet heard of any major hurdles so far, which means you guys are doing a really good job, or it just hasn't happened yet. But I think for us it was, during that pause process, it did let the organization come to the conclusion that I was starting to get pushed by the team when we're getting back to it, right? Versus the first time was like, oh my God, this means more work for us. And everyone's gone through, that has been in any kind of company that's gone through an ERP situation, a disaster, right? A system implementation that did not go well, or was just a total cluster, right? And so people come into these situations and these process changes with a little bit of negative bias at times, right? And you gotta, get through that and have them start to embrace what the potential is of what the world will look like on the other side. And so part of it, Alex is a little ahead of us on here, is that we haven't been there yet. We don't know what the other side is. I've been there in other companies, and I've had both good and bad experiences with process changes and new implementations. So I think for us, it's just very active, bi-weekly communication with all the stakeholders to make sure we're staying on top of the key areas we need to focus on. In the AI platform, it's been working very closely with the provider of that software, where they've had to make significant changes just to keep us as a client, because we were sold a bill of goods on the front end, and they blamed a lot of it on us. It's funny how that happens, right? That we weren't doing things properly and really interacting with the platform properly. And then we got to the point where we were able to show that we were, and we still weren't seeing the results, right? And so in that one, it was either we're going to pull the plug and go to another platform, because now there's other competitors out there that we can go to, or they're going to find a way to keep us happy and deliver what we need to move forward and be productive, and they're doing the right thing, and they're making those investments and making sure that we stay as a client, right? So that one, and that was, I would say on the front end of that one, was definitely a resistance from the scientists to really use the system properly and put in the data in a way that was usable, and then generate the models in a way that was getting a positive result. And so that was a bit of a learning curve, but then we became experts on the system and could really point to the place that the system was failing us. And so I think there was a good takeaway from that too, that the team needs to be very heavily involved in the successful outcome of implementation. And if it doesn't, there's much to blame as a potential software vendor. So I'm hoping we'll take some of that, into what we're doing now in the ERP process, in integration with the Salesforce side as well, and have a similar outcome in terms of getting to the right answer.
A couple things I've learned is either you're all in or you're all out, right? You can't be half in the pool. You need to be all in and dedicate proper resources and proper time and proper funding. If you don't do that, it's going to be a failure, number one. Number two is recognizing that what might be more efficient for the organization and be needed for scale isn't more efficient for everybody in the organization. And so we have people in our organization who have been doing the same thing the same way for 15 plus years. I mean, using QuickBooks, which wasn't right for a company of our size, and putting in Excel. I mean, it was ingrained in their head how to process an order, right? Well, now we have NetSuite, and there's more clicks, and it actually takes her longer to process an order now than it did previously. I mean, it takes longer to load up in the morning, and that individual's thinking, why did we just spend all that money and all that time implementing a system which takes longer for me to do my job? And it's important to recognize that and empathize with that individual, but also explain why we're doing it. That it isn't only about their job. There's 50 other reasons why QuickBooks was not right for our organization. But I think understanding that not everybody will see the benefit of what you're doing is important.
That's very realistic and very grounding. I think that's an important takeaway. So thank you for that. Greg, give us a horror story. Tell us about a train wreck you saw coming. And
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest train wrecks we typically see tie very closely into what we're talking about here is making sure the organization is committed to the change, they're bought into the change, everyone is on board. And if the answer is no, it's okay to pause a project and say we're not ready for this project yet. We know there's the benefits here, but we need to prepare the organization, better for this, staff up, resource properly, change priorities. Because typically what we see is for organizations that are only half in the pool, that's where we get the disaster situation of missed expectations, the project's never done, no one knows why we're doing this, and that's really very common in the ERP implementation space, which we're kind of talking about here today, is making sure the whole organization is on board, committed, and not just not on board and committed to, this is a project we're doing, but in a lot of cases, here are the projects we're not going to do to free up time and to ensure that, we get the outcome that we really need here.
do you ever counsel clients like, we need to pause here, or I'm worried about Joe over there in finance, he doesn't seem on board, or?
Yeah, I mean, and I think there's the counseling up front of here's what this is really going to take. Are we on board that we are going to say no to these projects? This person can't be doing this anymore. We're going to have to backfill this person's role with something else because they're so critical in this project. So I think a lot of that is the more counseling that happens up front and across the organization. And I think someone mentioned like actually signing the paper. I mean, we've actually done that in a lot of cases of, you got to sign this. I mean, this is the project charter. You're in agreement with this. This is going to be your role in the project. Do you agree? Because now's your chance to say no, so we can figure this out. Once the train is in motion, it does become a very key piece to keep focus on of understanding. Is this off track? Are we not really following what the project charter said? Are people focused on other things? And there are cases where we've had to pause projects because the resourcing wasn't there, and we were better off delaying it than trying to muddle along.
So that's an interesting point, because all of you have talked about you got to be in the pool, both feet, fully committed. But we've also, and everyone's aware of this, there's not a lot of people redundancy in organizations anymore. So, you say, hey, great news, everyone, we're going to implement a new ERP system. And everyone's like, oh, God, well, now I'm going to go from working 60 hours a week to 75 hours a week. And so how do you navigate that? Where do you find the resources? And this is a great time to say hire Greg, but like for real, how do you find the resources to do that?
Well, I'd say number one, you got to be realistic about it. Don't sugarcoat it. It's going to take extra time. People will be working overtime, and then to compensate them for it. Okay, it's an opportunity to actually pay people for the extra work. And three is hire experts to help you. If you have someone that can take on this project that has nothing else to do, then you had bloat in your organization, by definition. So if you're operating your business well, there should be extra work for somebody or for a group of people. They should know it, they should be paid for it, and you should bring in help.
One thing I'll add to that too is that I think it's very important, especially with these large projects, that it's folks within the organization that are hands-on, day-to-day, working through these projects, because we're talking about, we help lots of organizations through this, but at the end of the day, the organization needs to own the change, understand what's happening, where processes need to change, work with the organization. So there's a tendency to say, well, we have this project coming up, let's add more resources into the mix, bring in some help. When we do that, we're suggesting that clients bring in help to backfill people so that the people that really know the business can focus on the project.
Take us through, or do you have anything to add to that, Craig?
I guess the only other thing is that we've got a great company culture. People are very tight-knit. We've got folks that have been there for a long time. And nobody wants to fail or let down their fellow, team member, right? So once you have that buy-in with the key folks at the team and they're working on it together, clearly you compensate people, for the extra time they're doing. But the folks that we have working on it are not folks that have any mindset of failing at anything, right? And so they're going to work as hard as they need to be successful and to deliver, because they don't want to let anybody else that they're working with down in the organization. So I think it also comes down to what type of organization you have, how people interact on a basis outside of a process like this, but having had to go through other difficult process changes and difficult situations as companies evolve. And so, it's also important to pick the right leaders for for this type of project, making sure you have those folks on the team that the last thing they're going to do is want to fail or drop the ball, and then compensate them and reward them, obviously, when the job is well done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, so that's an important fact that we've hammered. That's good. For anyone that's been tasked with a digital transformation project in your company, go and ask for a bonus. Is the takeaway from this. So along those lines, Chip talked about, or somebody asked a question of Chip at the end about how often does finance get in the way of projects like this, and his answer was always. So take us through your own, not giving away any secret sauce here, but the budgeting process within your organization and how that's evolved since you first started this digital transformation journey to now where you're sort of always digitally transforming.
Yeah, so obviously any type of project like this requires planfulness, not only financially but also time-wise, you've been talking about, right? And so you're not going to start it on a whim. Obviously, it needs to be properly budgeted for. We set aside a percentage of our budget every year for IT expense, whether it's, consultants, whether it's internal software, et cetera. And so each year we have one or two new projects that we're typically undertaking as part of our overall budgeting process. And those decisions are made not in a vacuum, obviously. I mean, finance has to play a role. I mean, obviously we're all in business to make money, right? And we're also doing ROI calculations. Why are we doing this? Why are we spending this money now? Our CFO is obviously involved in our go, no-go decisions. So yeah, absolutely, budgeting has to be a part of this.
Do you, when you're planning these budgets at this, at the end of the prior year, and you said you've got one or two every year, are those defined when you're building the budget, or is there some flex in the budget for new things that might come up as the year?
So typically, major projects we're already defining.
You've already.
Obviously, there is room for other miscellaneous IT needs. Whether it's capital for laptops or break fix stuff. But again, something like this, regardless of the funding, you need to be very planful with people's time. Do you have resourcing? Is the right time in the organization's life cycle? And so to me, if you can't budget for it, plan for it, unless it's an emergency, it's gonna be hard to be all in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about you, Craig?
Yeah, for some reason it's always not quite enough money, right? And when you plan for it, so there's always has to be some flex in it, right? And I think the business case has to be made, obviously. But we look at it in sort of an overall CapEx budget, right? So we're buying very specialized tools in how we make our products in the lab every year, our manufacturing line, right? And then an extension of the IT is an extension of all of that to help make what we make better and hopefully faster. We were a recipient of one of the M4 Matching Grant Awards from Maryland for $50,000 to actually help with this process implementation, which was great. Those sort of programs really do help, so I want to give Maryland the call out for that. It's a great program. We should all support it. And so I think that helps take up some of the costs and maybe give a little more room in some areas. So we think creatively about how do we fund these projects, and so along the way here. But there's always things that you don't account for, right? It takes always a little longer and a little more expensive more money than you plan on every time. I have yet to have the project which comes in really under budget and 10 weeks earlier. I'm not sure about Alex. If you have a way to do that, you can walk me through it later, but I haven't done that yet.
We'll put it on the agenda for next year.
Sounds good. So I think sit down, best laid plans, you put together the budget, both team-wise, time-wise, and dollars. And then just try and keep to it as much as you can. And if you're going to go over, there has to be a business case made for it. You just can't have scope creep. Like there's a certain level of that we watch really carefully. And if someone says, oh, we didn't include this extra $25,000 on this thing, can we do it? The answer is sure. Put together the business case, sit down with the CFO, and if you get through him, then we can talk about it, right? But it's very easy to say, oh, there's only 5,000 more here, and 2,000 more here, and 8,000 more here. And scope creep is the death of a budget really anywhere, but particularly on any kind of CapEx investment, long-term investment projects like this. So.
Well, I think that's the argument for the really smart planning, right? You have to clearly define the requirements, communicate them, whoever the vendor is, so that try and avoid that scope creep if you can, but can't always.
It's going to happen. Then you have to manage it, right?
Yeah. Okay. I want to go back to Greg as sort of like a closing thought, and then we can take some questions, and if we don't have questions, I'll ask a few more. But I thought it might be helpful for everyone here to understand, take us through, if you were going to build a roadmap, help some of these folks build a roadmap, or they were going to do it on their own, who do they assemble, what are the questions to ask, what are the key components? So just give us a quick high level, without giving away the secret sauce here. What goes into actually doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this a couple of times, but one of the biggest things is having a cross-functional team that's building the plan. And that's just not a cross-functional team of leadership. That's a cross-functional team of people across all levels of the organization, because there's going to be different pain points, different opportunities. We're going to learn different things about the organization, where there's process issues, where there's potential customer friction. If you don't talk to people at all levels of the organization and then across the organization, you're going to miss things and maybe not realize that what you may have thought was a unique issue in a part of the organization really is something that's broader that needs to be accounted for. So we always try to start with a cross-functional team to make sure that we're getting the correct guidance across the organization. And really our process is to lead the organization through it. I mean, we need to learn from the organization to help build the plan. But we're asking questions about not even about technology. I mean, if we typically avoid the technology questions first. We're really just trying to first learn about what keeps you up at night. Where are you going? Where's your team going? Where's the organization going? And really just get a sense of what the current state is. Where there's obviously pain points, gaps, potential opportunities, and really spend the time to kind of coalesce all that information together over time until we get a good picture of the organization, and then work with that team to talk about, okay, well, what are the common themes? What are the priorities? Are there things that we need to solve today versus what do we need to plan for long term? And we try to iteratively build that roadmap out so that, again, what are those kind of core foundational things that absolutely need to be in place, whether it's ERP, security, whatever that data analytics, whatever that may be, establish that there's what the core tenets of the plan are. And then from there, it's typically a prioritization effort of, we have all these ideas, let's take a look at what's a logical order to sequence them, roll them up, what comes first, why, and walk everybody through that. So at the end of the day, there's buy-in in the plan. The plan that we are executing on is the organization's plan, not any one team's priorities. That's the key to the plan is everybody's bought into the plan, understands the plan, and in a lot of cases understands what we're not doing as well. I mean, I've said this a couple times, but that's, I think, a really important part of a plan is making sure that there's a gate there of ensuring that the plan doesn't get compromised over time by ideas that might sound good, but they're really not part of the core plan that we're trying to execute against.
Mm-hmm. I think what's interesting there's a lot of interesting things what you said, but one thing that stands out is it almost seems like the technology gets layered on as like a second thought. The first step is business process, business goals,
for sure, yeah.
And then it's, what can technology solve? It's not technology for technology's sake. Yeah,
I mean, it's all about what are the needs, where can we serve customers better, where is there risk that we need to eliminate, and then figure out how technology can play a role in this. And in a lot of cases, even then when you figure out what the technology is, it's not even the technology, the NetSuite versus the Microsoft versus the whatever. They all address the need, but it's how do we then effectively implement that change in the organization to succeed? Is kind of the next layer down from there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We'll open up to the audience if there's any questions. Go ahead.
Hi, this is really informative. All four of you is really informative, and especially Alex and Greg. I'm living the pain right now. Probably 9 months behind. And Alex, I'm hearing you. I was hearing myself, like I was talking my own journey from Office 365 to cloud to conference room technology to everything, and now we are going to NetSuite. So there's more to that. So right now, our plan is to go live in April, so you can imagine the feedback here. I almost felt like it is like three bubbles flowing in the air that I'm trying to blow in the same direction. One is people who are 20 plus years, who are really critical to the organization. There is this legacy knowledge that we have to carry to make sure that the core competency in our business that defines us is still there. And then there is a best practices that are there. How do I combine all this and blow in the same direction, just so we go in the and that in many times define the speed with which I can move on. So move the live date out 2 times already. Now the data migration started, so I'm really hopeful that April is the day, is the time. But I wanted to get your perspective on the need for customization. That as of now, I was trying not to go to customization, just to make sure that we got to adapt to the best practice out there. But then looking at that bubble, what defines us is going to define the need for the customization. So wanted to get your perspective. How do you balance between what is there, what needs customization, and then the budget comes in play, right? So at that time, you have to be flexible in making sure that you are doing it once in a lifetime probably. Unfortunately, this is the second time for me, but if it's one time, you want to do it right, and you don't want to constrain yourself with the budget. So we'd love to get your perspective.
Sure. So a couple things there. First thing I would say, we just went through this, was you have 2 options, right? With the AI transformation, it's change your processes to match an off-the-shelf solution, or it's customize the solution to match your process. And it might be counterintuitive, but we decided to change our process to match the off-the-shelf solution. All the horror stories I've heard have been driven by over-customization of solutions that then don't end up working the way that you want to, and you're changing your process anyway. So we took it as an opportunity to look at flow charting out how we did business, and look at best practices. How does NetSuite want you to do business off the shelf, and how could we do as minimal customization as possible? First of all, that'll decrease costs, it'll decrease implementation time, and most importantly, decrease potential issues with it once you have implemented it. The other piece that I'll give you is you mentioned 20 plus members of your organization. One thing we did was we ran side by side for 6 months, which is extra work, but side by side, because issues will arise. And cutting over cold turkey, I think that very risky. So we continue to actually enter orders into QuickBooks and NetSuite for I think it was almost 6 months before we were comfortable that all the kinks were out of there. And I had a lot of cautionary tales. I mean, one of my biggest customers is a Fortune 50 company. They're on the NASDAQ. Multi-billion-dollar company. They did a big ERP global transition, and they went 4 months that they couldn't process customer orders. I mean, it was a disaster. I mean, actually tanked stock price. I mean, that ERP probably cost them multiple billions of dollars of value. And they did not run systems side by side. So we're much smaller than they are, but it was well worth the money to ensure that all the kinks are worked out. My folks are properly trained. That everybody knows how to operate under this new process. So hopefully I answered that question. But specifically, I use the opportunity to change our process to as much off-the-shelf solution as possible versus customization.
Yeah.
When did you take customization? So right now, what we are doing is I'm putting all the change requests on. I said we are not making any change. We'll go through and see the what the changes that you made to the last, or you started making it as
I believe in an iterative process, and so we implemented with off-the-shelf solutions. And here's an example. We're launching our products internationally right now, and so we're implementing the One World module. We didn't do that originally. I don't want to keep delaying and overcomplicating in the process. But again, that's one other benefit of taking an off-the-shelf solution is then when you're adding modules later, it's a lot easier to add modules later to an off-the-shelf solution that's scalable than to a customized solution.
Yeah,
I have the same story. One of my customers went through the same thing. They were taking 1 month to create a partner. They were that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say we're also pursuing a modular process, right? There's a lot of components in the system we're putting in place, and we laid out from a calendar perspective when each of those are going to come up. We're not doing everything at once. We're definitely going to do parallel order processing for at least 90 days in the project plan as well. But I've gone through one of these in the past where there was a lot of customization, and it was just a disaster when it came to software upgrade path, right? Because there is no guarantee from the vendor that anything that you did is going to work with whatever they do in their software upgrade path going forward. And then you're iterating on top of iterations you've already made, and it just becomes a very expensive cost center, so it was what we experienced, and if I could do it again, which I am, we're just not doing that. We are going to change our business process. If there's something that really needs to be customized, you're allowed to be outside of that software platform, and a discrete app that comes into it, a utility that we may want to add on to it. But that's it. It's sort of like we are not going to get outside of the upgrade path, period. It's just not worth it.
One last thing is the NetSuite pushes them to be more of a CRM kind of software. Do you like Salesforce?
They're not a CRM software.
They are not a CRM software.
No, we evaluated it. It's not. I mean, it would have saved us a lot of money, but it wasn't close to meeting our needs, and so we don't use that at all. We use just the NetSuite ERP software, and then Salesforce, and they do integrate with each other very well. Yeah.
So there's a plugin for
Yeah.
Salesforce.
Yep.
Same. Salesforce is our core platform for really all of the key, most important part, which is customer touching, right? And so we're not. Yeah, I think they still by far have the best product out there. Yeah.
And one other thing I'll say as part of that too is that we've talked about steering committees and having the right team as you go through implementation. I believe that committee should when the project's done, that committee doesn't disband. That now becomes the committee that's trying to maximize value out of the system. So we're a year and a half into NetSuite in Alex's case, and that committee still meets weekly to talk about here's our punch list, here's our prioritizations, here's the wish list of things that we thought we wanted when we went live, but we chose not to. And half those wish list items don't exist anymore because we realize that the system may have accomplished that in a different way. We're now comfortable with it, and it would have been wasted effort. But I think the key is for all these major initiatives in the organization, you need that team, that core team, to stay focused, stay on task, continue thinking about what the system is going to do for the organization post go live, so that it's not just we put the system in and it's forever hold your peace.
One more comment on the ERP system. We haven't talked about your implementation partner. I mean, perhaps most important to a successful on-time, on-budget process is a really good implementation partner. So, step one is choosing the software, and step two is finding a really good, creative, flexible, hardworking implementation partner. And we did not have a great one to start. Luckily we had SC&H, we had our own team that overcame some of that. They had, massive turnover during our project. Oof. And now we've actually switched consulting partners for the add-on work versus our initial implementation partner, and it's been night and day. So again, in an ERP or any other major software project, don't only look at the actual software, look at who's going to help you implement it.
Just one quick question about that statement you just made. So you said that your partner that you initially went with didn't do the job right, you had to switch partners. What did you learn from that next time you go to vet an integration partner? Did you learn, have any lessons you guys have?
That's a great question. I'm going to punt that over to Greg, because I honestly don't know what we did wrong there.
Yeah, I mean, I think in that situation, I mean, a lot of the challenges came from a massive amount of unexpected turnover with that partner right during the middle of the implementation, which we didn't see coming. But I think when we evaluate partners and who is the right organization to work with, there is a vetting process that has to occur there. Spending a lot of time talking to references, really understanding, do they get our business? You can say you do manufacturing, it's a process manufacturing, it's batch manufacturing, or do you specialize in small organizations versus large organizations? Having as many of those conversations as possible up front, and just really getting the feeling that you like these people. I mean, that's a I think a key thing that we're looking for. Are these people that we truly feel want to partner with us? We can partner with them. They work the way we work. They're flexible when they need to be. They're original when they also need to be. I mean, that's typically when we go through like a selection process. There's a select the software, and now let's talk to 5 or 6 partners and figure out what the right one is. If you're not talking to several, it's very hard to compare and contrast what good looks like.
Dude.
Where does the concept of a failback point fit into your planning? You already addressed a little bit about running in parallel for about 6 months to make sure. I'm not sure that's a failback plan, but it does give you a failback option. Is it a deliberate part of your plan before you embark? And how do you set your conditions for knowing whether you want to fail back, other than a catastrophic execution when you do actually flip the switch?
Yeah, I'll add one comment there. I mean, I think the biggest piece that we try to look at as we go through these projects is what's the criteria and conditions that need to be in place to move forward. So I think you mentioned you pushed your go live a couple of times. We pushed the go live at Alex's company a couple of times because we felt that if we did go forward, we would be in a position where success wasn't guaranteed. So I think a lot of what we look to do is really, really make sure that we are organizationally, technology across the board prepared. We've done the testing. We really ensured that there's going to be success here before we flip the switch. So we don't have to have that conversation around did we make the right decision? How do we go backwards? It's very, very, very hard to fail back once you move forward, especially for a key business system like ERP. So I would say all the planning on the front end of making sure that the success criteria is understood and everybody's checked the box, signed the paper that I've done the testing, that's really what we look to.
Anybody else?
How did you guys set expectations with your teams when you started these programs? And maybe how did your expectations change during your implementations?
I can start. I mentioned earlier, our team together develops a project charter. What are the attributes have to be? What's minimum viable product, a solution look like for us? And then we have a project leader internally who's responsible for bringing everybody together. We have a discrete timelines, discrete go live dates, a discrete budget. I mean, everybody on the team, very transparent. What the goals are, what does the end result look like? How much can we spend? And we're meeting regularly in a steerco, a project team model to grade ourselves versus our scorecard. So just like any other project within our organization, product development project, we're constantly checking in versus scorecards. If we need to adjust in certain areas, we will. But it's very clear up front what the goals are, how much we can spend, who's in charge, et cetera.
Yeah. So I would also add just to like the last question too. I mean, I think from this fail-safe question, it shouldn't be a surprise. Like you're not going to get to the end and be like, oh my God, we're not ready, right? There should be many checkpoints along the way to know how things are going and to course correct along the way. And if you haven't done that, then sort of shame on the organization because somebody or a lot of folks weren't paying attention to the plan and the execution. So that, in my mind, that should never happen at the end, right? You might do a course correction. Maybe you picked the wrong implementation partner and you need to find somebody else, but that should be known, I think, while you're still going through making the sausage. I mean, I think for us, expectations is this is going to be really hard. It's not going to be fun. We're going to make some mistakes along the way. We're going to work closely together to try and fix those as quickly as we can. and we're all in it together, right? I mean, that's where we are, and I think that's what I've done in the past. But I think the expectation is that this is hard. This is not going to go smoothly, but we have to just figure it out because you got to get to the other side of it, right? There has to be an end date. I think it's just being honest with what the process is going to look like, and then we'll all be happy when it's over. But as you're going through it, this is going to be a meaningful lift.
Nobody's had fun implementing an ERP system.
Yeah,
We started this. We would joke. We're like, this process is really going to suck.
Yeah, it's going to suck.
I mean, it's not going to be fun for anybody. Yep.
Yeah.
Craig
Last one.
mentioned earlier the importance of going paperless. What industries are you seeing are most conducive to or most open to it?
Well, that's a broad question, so I don't have a full answer. I'd say we're trying to go there in terms of just even customer POs, payments to vendors, payments coming in from our customers are the key areas that we're going, paperless first. I think, wherever you can remove that as a piece of the internal process, it's a great thing to go do. I would love for us to be, 100% paperless at some point, right? Like everybody else. But even with our customers, they're pretty much going paperless. Our large multinationals, they'll only pay you with ACH. They only want to get, billed with an ACH with an online invoice. They'd like to be at some point be able to come in and check what our inventory is, which at some point we will get there. We're not there yet. To avoid having to call the customer service team or the sales team to know or ask them to get something shipped. To be able to see where a shipment might be in the process or a product is in manufacturing process. So there's lots of cool things that we have visions of how to get to that paperless concept. I don't think there's anybody except for probably the IRS, which still likes faxes, right? So everybody we're working with for the most part I think is all on board trying to get there as quickly as they can.
We're 100% paperless. I mean, I know paper at all, but it is also generational too. Some folks still like taking notes on paper. Most of my organization, everything's digital paper. OneNote, that kind of stuff too. The one comment that I'll make though that we're always having in the organization a active debate is regarding legal liability, right? One of the advantages of paperless is that everything is permanently accessible. I can search in OneNote and find my notes from 8 years ago about one topic that I had on one day. Well, there's also a liability there too around legal discovery, right? And so, how long emails be kept? Is OneNote discoverable? I'm not, we've had that debate with lawyers before. So going paperless is great from an efficiency perspective, but it is something to think about from a legal liability perspective, whether you truly want everything to be paperless.
I'm going to call it here because I don't want to eat into the roundtable time. These were awesome questions. You guys did a great job. Thank you so much. These very specific tactical questions that you all are asking are great ones to bring to the roundtables because there's going to be experts and your peers there to brainstorm with. So stick around for them. The roundtable list is on page 5 of your programs. I think there's going to be signs on the tables. Maybe. I'm not really sure. But you'll know it. You'll know your table. So find your topic on page 5, find your table, stick around for happy hour. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Thank you.